Chapter 6. She groaned and slammed down her phone. How could he possibly know? He didn't have to rush over, but he would, because he was suspicious and wary of her. However, it was a good excuse to have Mac make some coffee while he was here. He was the best at making coffee she'd ever met. She could make a decent cup, but still, he had a special touch. It was frustrating because it was the same damn coffee maker and the same damn coffee that she used. But when he did it, magic happened. Like everything else that happened in the kitchen, other people seemed to have a special touch. Or maybe she was missing it. Either way, her self-confidence was non-existent when it came to food preparation of any kind. She continued to surf on the internet and sipped her tea until Mac arrived. As soon as she heard him pull into the driveway, she slammed down the lid of her laptop. She got up and walked to the front door, opened it, and studied the crowd outside. A few vehicles and only one TV station van were here now. Maybe the crowd had finally gotten bored and had left to find other more amusing pursuits. Mac waved at her as he closed the door to his vehicle. He walked up her driveway, his stride determined and forceful. She liked that about him. He never hesitated. He always seemed to know what he was doing, and why. Whereas for her, life was just one big question mark. He stepped onto the front porch. Looks like the crowds are finally dispersing. Good, she snapped. They can go bug someone else for a while. He just grinned, motioned her inside, then stepped in behind her, shutting the door. Did you put on coffee? No, I didn't. You can put it on yourself. He laughed, not fooled in the least. You still haven't figured it out, have you? She flushed and looked at him with a sideways glance. That's not fair. I make coffee every morning. Yeah, chances are you aren't putting in enough grounds, he said. She stood beside him and watched as he measured the water, poured it into the back of the maker, and then brought out her small grinder to grind the beans and afterward to put them into the coffee filter. She shrugged. I do exactly the same thing. Maybe. And maybe I'm just gifted. Because it was too close to her earlier thought, she wouldn't give him the satisfaction of agreeing. Any results from the lab on that bone we found in your mother's garden? Max snorted. It's too soon for any results, Doreen. She walked over to the table and sat back down again, opening the lid on her laptop. But then she realized he would ask questions about what she was looking up. So she pushed the lid closed again. He slowly turned, glanced at her at the laptop, back at her guilty face, and gave her a long, serious look. What are you up to? She gave him an innocent look that didn't fool him in the least. She shrugged and sat back, picking up her cup to drink the remains of her tea. Why do I have to be up to anything? You look guilty as hell, he snapped. She pinched her lips closed and glared at him. It didn't matter how good-looking he was still irritating. He shoved his hands in his pockets, leaned against the counter, looking like a GQ model worthy of the front cover, even without trying. She didn't know how he did that. Her former husband had to work at it. He had these fancy lotions and creams and hairsprays and conditioners to style his hair, more than Doreen used even back then, and his suits were always dry cleaned. Mac probably ran his fingers through his hair once he was awake, and called it good enough. He wore jeans, shirt and a blazer, and he looked just fine, rugged and handsome and fit. It was a natural look, and he wore it well. But he waited and waited, his gaze going to the animals now collecting around him. They didn't come and say hi or bark when I came in. They were eating. She said it, as if that was enough of an explanation. He shot her a look. So. He bent down and scratched Muggs on the back of the head. This guy is a hell of a watchdog. Why wasn't he barking? Because he recognized your vehicle, your footsteps, and your voice, she said grudgingly. They all do now. He nodded as if that made sense. I sure hope they continue to be guard dogs, or guard animals, I should say, when I'm not around. The coffee finished brewing, and he poured 2 cups, bringing them to the table. He has been barking and causing chaos with all the reporters outside. I just hope they leave me alone soon. She lifted her cup and blew on her coffee, but it was too hot to drink. Looks like you're getting there, he said with a smirk. Only one news vehicle now. She nodded. As he straightened in his chair, he caught sight of the tea towel she had quickly tossed over the small box. He frowned and, without asking, lifted the towel. Hey, she said. Mind your own business. He shot her a look. With you, whatever you do ends up being my business. He nodded down at the box. Whose is that? She didn't answer. She just stared at him, her eyes wide. Interesting, he said. The minute you react like that, I know something major is going on. He picked it up and studied it. It's pretty. Yes, it is. Whose is it? He repeated. She shrugged, testing her coffee. Perfect. I found it, so it's mine. And then he flipped it and saw the name underneath. His eyebrows shot up and his jaw dropped. Slowly, ever so slowly, he turned and stared at her. His shoulders sagged. He sat at the table and took a swallow of his coffee, as he continued to eye her. What? She flushed but didn't say anything more. Doreen, talk to me, he ordered on a low growl. Something about a man with authority in his voice made her give up all her secrets. I found it in the creek. Where? Just past my place, she explained. Actually, the animals found it. I went over to take a look at what they were all staring at, and I found it in the water. The animals found it? He turned to look at Muggs, Goliath, and Thaddeus. Which ones? I think Thaddeus first saw it from his perch on the neighbor's fence. Then Muggs finally woke up and barked at it, until Goliath joined in. That's when I got really curious, saw something white, and dug around in the creek. He studied her for a long moment, and then gave a hearty sigh. You better show me. Why? It's just a nice little box. But she hurried to drink more of her coffee, before leaving the house. And if I open your laptop, I won't find the name Betty Miles in your search bar, or research up on the screen related to her, will I? She flushed, dropping her gaze to the notepad in front of her. He nodded. That's what I thought. He motioned toward the back door. Let's go. She glared at him but hopped up, opened the door, and called all the animals. Mac wants to see the location for the box you found today, guys. Come on. Muggs ran out, barking cheerfully. Goliath sauntered past as if orders were beneath him, and he was only accompanying them because he felt like it. Thaddeus, on the other hand, flew to her shoulder and cheered them on with a war cry in her ear. She led the way to the back of the property. You made a great start with the fence, Mac said. Hard work, isn't it? Yes, it is, she confessed. I was working until the animals started acting up. Then I found the box and came back in. Why did you call me? Instinct, he said bluntly. It told me to get over here before you got yourself into more trouble. Apparently, I'm already too late. She snorted. I don't think even your instincts can keep me out of trouble. He laughed out loud. Isn't that the truth? They'd reached the back of the property. He stopped for a moment and smiled. I can't believe everybody has this creek view fenced off. It's beautiful. She turned enthusiastically. See? That's what I thought. Especially since my fence was just a nightmare. They both turned to look at the mess of fallen wood and iron poles and wire. He motioned at the stack she had managed to cut up. You've done more than I thought you would. She shrugged. I still have a lot of work left. She turned and stepped behind her neighbor's fence. She motioned at it. You know who lives there? I met them when I was investigating the murders last week, Mac said. I thought you'd met him. I did. I just wondered if his wife was really there. I haven't met her. Why? Because I thought I talked to her today. But then I couldn't decide if it was a her or a him. She took a few more steps, studying the creek, trying to place her animals as they were earlier today. Muggs had gone to the outcropping. And as she thought about that, Muggs moseyed past her to the outcropping, parking his butt in the same position it had been in earlier. Goliath sauntered around to the far side. I think they were at opposite sides of the outcropping earlier today. But their placement was similar to this. Thaddeus, still on her shoulders, made a funny caw sound and flew down to sit beside Goliath. She motioned to where the creek had pooled in the circle between the animals. The box was in here. Mac looked at her as if he didn't believe her. She held out her hands. It was honest. He raised an eyebrow, looked at the animals, and stepped forward. How did you get into the creek? I went in barefoot, she explained. She glanced at his expensive shoes and socks and jeans. Too bad you can't go in and see if anything else is there. Did you see anything else? He asked. She shook her head. No, I didn't. I saw the box, picked it up, and brought it out. Not quite, her neighbor from the other side of the fence said. You also asked questions about the Betty Miles's case. She glared at the fence in front of her. I'm not exactly sure who I'm speaking to, Doreen snapped, but you're the one who volunteered the information. The voice on the other side jeered. Semantics, semantics. You're the one who was curious. Yes, I am. But you can go back in your house anytime now, she called out. Don't have to. It's my yard, the voice snapped. But it did seem to get fainter. She waited another few moments and then whispered to Mac, Do you think he's gone? Mac, being over 6 feet tall, stepped up on the outcropping beside the dog, where he could better see over the fence, and then shrugged. I can't see anybody. Good, she said. I didn't realize having neighbors meant having people in your business all the time. He sighed. This is hardly being intrusive. He motioned back at the water. You want to point out exactly where the box was? She stepped out of her sandals and said, I'll do one better than pointing it out. I'll show you exactly where it was. She stepped into the water and gasped. How can it be so cold? It's glacier water coming down from the mountains. She shot him a look. Are you serious? This is actually from a glacier, like, as in ice cubes? No ice cubes here, he said patiently. It's water, remember? Not frozen over, at least not yet. She shrugged. Still, there should be ice cubes at this temperature. She leaned forward and studied the water, then pointed. Yes, see that indent from the box being here? No, not really. The creek has filled the void. He squatted at the bank beside her and studied it. You want to shift that ground a little bit and see if anything else is in there? She shook her head. Not really. It's cold. Remember? Of course you want to because I see something silvery. If you don't want to get it, I will. He rested one hand on the ground and stretched out his other arm. Right in front of her, his hand disappeared into the cold water and into the space where the box had rested. He stuck his fingers right into the dirty sand and rock. Aha! What? I found something. And pulled his hand back out. In his palm was something shiny, metal, and very old-looking.